So obviously this is a crypto audience, which is pretty familiar with the kind of primary, mission of Ripple and whatnot. But so I thought maybe it'd be good to start off. Obviously you have a lot of Ripple fans out there. There's some FUD out there around Ripple also. I think it'd be great to get kind of an update from you on kind of where Ripple's kind of products are, market traction, customers and partners, just to kind of get started off. And I have a lot of questions going into the new, your Flare partnership and MoneyGram deal and things like that. But I'd love to get just kind of an overall update on Ripple to start.
Yeah, look, I apologize for that technical problem there. It seems like we're working now. So at a most macro level, 2020 has definitely been a record year for Ripple on lots of levels. For those, I think most people in the crypto space are pretty familiar with what we're doing, but we are using crypto. We're using blockchain technology to solve a cross-border payments problem. There's about $127 trillion in annual transaction value going across borders. And when you go across those networks, you have an interoperability problem. And in effect, we've been using the same underpinning solution there for about 50 years. We commonly talk about a SWIFT. This year, we've seen, despite lots of headwinds that the whole economy is experiencing, we've seen growth. We expect to grow overall network traffic about 5x year on year. So feel really good about that, and signing up about 2 new production contracts a week and continue to make good progress there. So super happy with it so far.
That's great. And most of the kind of endpoints and customers, is it more like smaller technology, like remittance providers and things like that? Is it more banks? Is it more of a mix?
It's a mix. I mean, we certainly have some big banks that have signed up. I mean, we've worked with Santander from early days. One of the things that often people conflate and sometimes even confuse is what is Ripple doing that is not using XRP versus what is touching XRP. And so what we're seeing is the early adopters who are using the product we call OnDemand Liquidity, which uses XRP to fund real-time liquidity. I will say I dialed into Zoom was working for me watching Michael Saylor. He said something at the end there about he doesn't think crypto works well for payments because it's, I think, it's slower. And I think that's a very Bitcoin-centric point of view. The reason why we use XRP in the payment flows and the reason why it's worked so effectively for us is because XRP, by contrast, is so much faster and so much cheaper on a per transaction basis. I agree with him that, I've said publicly, much to the frustration but many in the Bitcoin kind of maximalism point of view, that Bitcoin, it's going to be very challenged to solve a payments problem given its scalability issues. By the way, and I think this, and I will say it again, I am long Bitcoin. And so when I say stuff like that, the trolls of the world come out and say, all kinds of stuff about my view on Bitcoin. I'm long Bitcoin. I'm a believer, but it's not going to be the solution for payments.
Yeah. I think Michael has some good points around that.
Yeah.
And that's, and it's needed in some senses. Our industry gets a little bit myopic sometimes about the potential versus reality.
For sure. And to that point, I think one of the healthiest things we all can do as an industry, and where I really agreed with some of his points, is like the first step to solving a problem is admitting you have one. And I think sometimes I see the industry saying, well, no, scalability is not really an issue, and this is going to solve, and this is going to solve. It's like, well, look, let's all agree there is a scalability problem. There is a power consumption problem, right? When Bitcoin mining takes up 1% of global energy consumption, like we should talk about that. We shouldn't pretend it's not real. We should say, hey, look, this is what's happening. Great. Let's figure out how do we address that? The other hot button kind of lightning rod issue that everyone likes to yell at me about is China controlling the Bitcoin blockchain. You got 60 to 70% of, 4 or 5 miners controlling 60 to 70% of the Bitcoin hash rate. Like, we can say it's a problem. We say it's not a problem. We can't say it's not happening. That is what it is. And we should just say, okay, maybe we say we don't care. I think in a world where the Chinese Communist Party can delay the largest IPO in history, maybe we should care a little bit. Maybe we should be aware of that and understand what are those implications.
Yeah, and it's a good point. I mean, I've seen some of your Twitter posts talking about XRP versus BTC, efficiency and scalability, obviously, and things like that. And obviously, Bitcoin's Achilles heel will be proof of work. I think it's also what made it possible, and I don't know any way you could possibly ever change it. but it will always be a problem, and it will always relegate BTC to probably a pure store of value. Whereas everything else in crypto is kind of going for everything else, with a few exceptions.
Yeah, look, I admit that I am long Bitcoin because I do think as a store of value, it's extremely efficient, and I'm a believer. I have also very publicly said that I think the long-term value of any digital asset is really going to be derived from the utility of the asset and what problem it's solving. And I think you are going to see lots of different use cases and lots of different technologies applied to those use cases. Ripple's view is, hey, XRP from a payments point of view, particularly for cross-border payments, is extremely efficient. And that's why I think we've been able to sign up, a couple hundred customers. We've got, we've publicly talked about more than $7 billion flowing through RippleNet, 20% of it going through XRP. And so, I feel really good about the momentum we have. I think all of us should, embrace real, like what is real versus talking about, experiments. And again, the one thing that Michael Saylor said, which was really good, is, look, if you're talking about money and experimentation in the same sentence, you got a problem. You can't be experimenting with people's money.
Yeah. And you mentioned a couple of times your ODL, on-demand liquidity, and kind of line of credit systems. I'm not sure, I actually just learned about this recently getting ready for this, but I'd love to have you talk a little about like what you're doing there and how that kind of folds into the future of Ripple.
Yeah, so look, we want to see XRP be extremely liquid, extremely efficient for tight spreads between fiat currencies and XRP. We aren't trying to replace fiat currencies in how we are using XRP. And what we're doing instead is saying, look, you can hold $1, and we work with MoneyGram as one very well-known customer in on-demand liquidity. They're holding $1 and they want to have a Mexican peso. They're selling the dollar. They're buying the equivalent units of XRP. They're moving the units of XRP across the XRP ledger, and they're selling the XRP and buying Mexican pesos. That entire transaction flow can take, effectively is seconds, when by comparison, how it works today in the pre-funding that MoneyGram has of Mexican pesos, they've got capital deployed, working capital deployed all over the world. And there's a cost to that. And so to the extent we can make it much more efficient in terms of capital costs, much more efficient in terms of speed and a per transaction basis, it demonstrates how effective XRP is in that case. Now, we've also layered on top of that with players in the on-demand liquidity space, a product we call line of credit, which is currently in beta. But the idea here is customers who are looking to grow into new corridors. If you're a small payment company, remittance company that wants to open up a corridor in the Philippines, do you want to park a couple $1 million worth of Philippine pesos at a bank in the Philippines, or would you rather scale more quickly and not have to have that working capital out there? You can use on-demand liquidity to grow into that business opportunity more quickly.
So how does that actually work? I'm trying to get my head around. Are they buying XRP as kind of a medium, as the deposit, or is there just no deposit? You're actually extending, real credit terms.
Well, it depends a little bit which customer we're talking about. But again, the simplest way to think about it is, any of these companies, they're holding $1 today, or a British pound, or a euro, or Australian dollar, and they want to, and again, I'll use the Mexican peso as an example, that they want liquidity in Mexico, they want it real time. Their option historically has been to pre-fund those accounts, have the capital sitting there, and then use Swift messaging to enable the debits and credits there. We simply go to them and say, look, you can use the liquidity in the XRP marketplace. And by us partnering in that space, it's actually grown the overall liquidity significantly. So you're selling that British pound, you're selling that dollar, you're getting the XRP, you're moving the XRP. This is all invisible to the customer, if you will. But what you get on the outcome is you have good liquid funds in Mexico.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, makes sense. So I'm going to change gears a little bit. We're going a little bit fast because we're a little shorter on time. So the Flare partnership I thought was really interesting, and not many things surprised me in crypto. That was a little bit of a surprise that you guys are kind of going that direction to create I'll let you explain what it is, so you'll do better than me. But it's a kind of a smart contract platform for kind of the XRP ledger. To go out, presuming to go after like DeFi type applications and things like that. But I'd love to kind of hear what you guys are doing.
Yeah. Well, so, look, one of the things I also agreed with what Michael Saylor was talking about is I think all boats will rise in the crypto space. And so we have definitely been an advocate of what's good for crypto is good for Ripple. Flare is a separate company. It's not an initiative within Ripple, but it's a company we invested in about a year ago right now. And from my point of view, the simple view is let's combine the best components of what XRP represents, which is extremely fast settlement, with some of the best components of what Ethereum represents, smart contracts, as well as something they call Avalanche for consensus. And that helps extends XRP's utility and allows developers to create smart contracts for new use cases like lending, like derivatives. So, I think it's super exciting to watch the Flare, the team there build what they're building. I think it is early days, but I think it's indicative of all the different ways that you can use the XRP ledger and the advantages the XRP ledger has relative to some other blockchains.
And the intention is still to airdrop this new token, Spark or XUMM, onto like XRP holders.
That's my understanding. Again, those are all decisions the Flare team is making, not Team Ripple.
Okay, so it's not you doing it. They're going to be issuing their own token. Okay, that goes in my next line of questioning, which is mostly around like a little bit around regulation and whatnot, which you talked about a lot. And obviously, airdrops have been, they're regulatorily they're a little risky, to say the least. So it's kind of wondering how you got kind of comfort with them doing that on top of your token. I mean, obviously, it's them doing it.
Well, yeah, it's them doing it, and it's not even on our token, right? I mean, the XRP ledger is an open source technology. At this point, Ripple is a very small participant from the technical infrastructure. The nature of how the validators work on the XRP ledger, Ripple only operates a very small handful of validators. There's over 150 out there. Even on the recommended lists that you see out there, Ripple's a small minority of those validators. So it's an open source technology. Lots of people, I think by last count, counted 150 different projects in the XRP ecosystem, Ripple being one. We're a big one, but we are certainly not the only one by any stretch.
Okay, it makes more sense. And sticking with the regulation kind of theme, like you've been talking a lot about even possibly moving headquarters and obviously Wave itself is a regulated entity. We're an RIA, sure. So we have the joys of dealing in a regulated world, which is brutal for a company our size. To be honest, I hate to think what portion of our corporate budget goes to compliance. But obviously, and we see around the world, like in the UK, the FCA, and in Singapore, the MAS, which we have a lot of experience with, and much of other groups are doing a much better job. I mean, do you see, Michael made a point in his speech talking kind of against, I guess I'd call it, regulatory shopping by moving jurisdictions and whatnot. But I guess, how are you kind of looking at this as far as Ripple goes and where you kind of see the risks around, the SEC and whatnot?
So look, I think Ripple from the earliest days of certainly my involvement there, and I think even before I got involved, I've been at the company over 5.5 years, we have been advocates of, hey, these should be regulated industries, and financial services where Ripple plays most aggressively, there are very robust regulations, and we've always worked with regulators and worked with regulated entities, around things like KYC controls, AML controls, and things like that. The challenge in the US, and even as you contrast, whether it's the MAS in Singapore, FCA in the UK, or FSA in Japan, they have been clear and they have been specific and all actually are in step with one another. And the US really has been out of step with other G20 markets like those countries. Switzerland would be another one we could add to the list. And the US, just recently, for example, the DOJ put out a report talking about crypto, and they highlighted 8 different jurisdictions, kind of overlooking what's going on in all things crypto. And all 8 kind of look at it slightly differently. Some people look at XRP as a commodity. Some people look at it as a virtual currency. Some people look at it as just a currency. And the SEC came out 2.5 years ago and said Bitcoin's not a security. And then about 2 months later, they said Ether's not a security, and they kind of stopped. And what that means is, hey, there isn't clarity. And at some point, after a period of time, when there is clarity in the UK, there is clarity in Japan, there is clarity in these other countries, it's not. I just want certainty and clarity so that we can build a business. And it has hurt our ability to sign up customers when you have a U.S. regulator that has not been specific on this point. In fact, the U.S. has had different answers from different parts of the government. We, of course, have relied upon what we've heard from the DOJ, and that when they say, hey, they view XRP as a virtual currency, well, we of course behave that way. But the SEC has not yet said what they think, and we certainly want them to provide that clarity, because it helps the whole. It doesn't just help Ripple; it helps everybody in the XRP market. And by the way, I think it helps everybody in crypto.
Yeah, no, it certainly would. And we've always kind of said that even if the final rules came down and they were pretty onerous, like just having the rules would be better. Even if they're lousy rules, I'd take lousy rules over greatness.
Look, I think it's a fair point, David. Like the frustrating thing for me, and again, I tend to agree with Michael that we shouldn't, as an industry, be regulatorily shopping. There are crypto projects that call the Isle of Man their headquarters, or jurisdictions that you're kind of like, okay, that is not necessarily. That's not what Ripple's talking about. I mean, when we think about where we might, if we had to move, we're looking at countries like the UK and Japan and Switzerland and Singapore, where this isn't trying to circumvent regulations, just to have that certainty, to have a level playing field as we develop technologies on top of the XRP ledger. We want a level playing field.
So that's good. So you're not thinking about like going to Panama or Liechtenstein or true, regulatory haven. So
yeah.
Okay. And I guess
those aren't on the list.
Okay. And I guess just to kind of follow up that question, is there kind of a decision timeline in your mind? That would be big news in the crypto sphere. Are you?
We have not put a timeline out there. I don't know. I guess because you're asking, it's a fair question. I'll put 6 months, within the next 6 months. I feel like we either need to have clarity, or we need to move somewhere where there is clarity. And living in that kind of amorphous middle space is not a good place to be.
Yeah, and also, and this has been, I think, kind of an open secret, but you guys have been talking about potentially doing an IPO at some point in the future. I guess, does that fall in line with the same regulatory thoughts? Like, would it help that if you had more regulatory certainty where you're operating?
For sure. In January or maybe early February of this year at Davos, I predicted that you would see some of the first crypto companies go public this calendar year. That's looking a little bit aggressive, given that we're in November. I think that all things COVID has changed some things. You've heard rumors of Coinbase's confidential IPO filing. I don't have any proprietary information there. Obviously, you've seen Bitmain doing things in Asian markets. But, look, I think there is little doubt that companies in the crypto space are reaching a point of maturity. Public investors are interested in accessing that. Frankly, you see that just from things like the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. Investors are clearly institutional. Public market investors are interested in this space. You are seeing companies at a maturity level that could warrant that. What I said at the beginning of this year was, I don't think Ripple will be the first to go public. I certainly don't want to be the last. And I'll stand by that statement. Certainly, also, it's been fascinating to see the SPAC activity and reverse merger things. And some of those, certainly, we get calls about those things, and we'll do what we think is right for Ripple shareholders on the right timeline, if you will.
Yeah, I wasn't going to ask, but yeah, you guys seem like a great SPAC candidate given your balance sheet. It's an unusual balance sheet for a potential IPO or SPAC candidate.
Sure.
It makes things a lot more interesting. Okay, and then and it's one last topic maybe go through is you've one thing I've always liked about Ripple, I think I've followed you guys for a long time, is you do a decent amount of philanthropy and donations. It's textbooks, the new Mercy Corp one I saw recently. I'd love to hear a little bit about what you're kind of where you guys are thinking along those kind of lines. I think you might be not probably not the only, but definitely the only large crypto company that takes a more philanthropic position.
Yeah. Okay. I'll a couple macro things first, and then a couple specifics on what Ripple is doing. I think that, as I said about kind of some things around the Bitcoin blockchain, the first step to solving a problem is admitting you have one. And I happen to have a lot of passion that Silicon Valley, where I have been for 23 years, has been a lot of positive for the world, but in some cases has had unintended negative consequences. Certainly, we see that as relates to elections, some of the abuse of the platforms. As you may know, I'm in the process personally of suing YouTube, and the company Ripple is suing YouTube because the people are pretending to be me on YouTube and taking advantage of people and stealing money, and then I get death threats.
I hadn't seen that actually. Okay.
So look, the philanthropic efforts we have embarked on is partly just like we think there is a role that companies like Ripple and really all of Silicon Valley should take a role in how do we do good for the world. And I think that starts at home. I think it starts in the communities in which we operate. We have donated about $150 million from what we call Ripple Impact, our effort to kind of impact the world through philanthropy. They've really been focused on education and blockchain literacy. We work with about 35 different universities and something called the University Blockchain Research Initiative, where we've made grants to 35 different universities around the world, in the US and around the world. And the last one I'll just highlight is around financial inclusion and some charitable work we've done to further financial inclusion. I just think that we all, as we're so fortunate as entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley to have some of the resources we do, to have the touch points. And I think all of us in Silicon Valley should be more aggressive and proactive in this area.
And that's great. And there's a lot of kind of suddenly wealthy companies across crypto still that I always feel should be doing a little bit more. There's a lot of found money in this sector still from 2017 that could do a lot of good in the world.
For sure.
Not 2 or 3% of it at least.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, great. Well, we're actually pretty much out of time, so we're on the next panel in a second. So again, huge thank you for doing this. Sorry for any technical challenges. Probably was our fault.
Really my fault.
Yeah. But yeah, really appreciate your thoughts and kind of speaking. And we'll introduce our next panel in a second, which is going to be led by Rahila.
All right. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate it.
Yeah.